All right, Steeler fans, it's time for the Monday morning conversation, which that's part of every single Monday in the off season during the Let's Ride podcast. And the person I have on today, you've heard before, and I've actually been on his show. Is kind enough for me to be on there. But Mark Bergin, formerly, I guess we should say, right, Mark, of Believe in Steelers. What's going on?
Jeff, it's great to see you. And anytime, any place you get to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's always a pleasure. So thank you for having me.
No problem. But your announcement, which you did on social media, that you were leaving Believe in Steelers, and it was a great message about like Taylor. You were kind enough to mention me in there, which I appreciate. What's next for you? I want to start off with that. Like, let everyone know, like, what's going on? You're leaving Believe in Steelers. What is the next step for Mark Bergin?
That's a great question, and I'm still trying to figure that out. A lot of great people over at the Believe Network. I've got some things in the works.
Cool.
Nothing I can announce yet.
Got it.
So there's been some conversations, but it just reached a point where for my career, I needed to figure out what the next best opportunity is. Still doing great work over at WRAL, covering all things Triangle sports. So think NC State, Duke, and North Carolina. I want to stay connected with the Steelers for whatever I do next, because the last 6 years, I've always said, Jeff, I'm an adopted Yinzer. I did not grow up in the 412. I did not grow up in Pittsburgh, but I took me in, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Again, I've had some conversations. As soon as I have anything to announce, I'll be sure to put that out on social media. But really, Jeff, the thing that's been great is being able to just connect to other people who are passionate about the Steelers and are passionate about football. And certainly you've been a part of that as well. Just the relationships I've built with people going on their shows and vice versa. It's just been more than I could ask for. So it was a great run over at the Believe Network. Very appreciative of everything that they provided me. But I also have to figure out what's next for me. And I'm still trying to figure that out.
Hey, I get it, man. I get it. And I know you're going to land on your feet wherever you do land. And I want to ask you before we go into the current Steelers team, when you look back on your time with the Believe in Steelers podcast, is there one moment, one memory that stands out amongst others? I mean, you shared some in that social media post when it was you met Ike Taylor for the first time, going to a game at Acrisure Stadium. I'm not sure if it was Heinz Field at the time. I want to be, correct in my assessment there of the stadium. But was there one moment in time that stuck out amongst the others?
Oh, man. And we had so many great guests, but honestly, Jeff, it was like the stuff off the air that happens and the conversations you have sometimes before podcasts. I mentioned this on my social media post. I mean, like, I think about it of like, if I was 12 or 13 years old and you told me some of these things would happen, I wouldn't believe you. And I put this in my social media post, but the final day we were at the combine last year, and we're coming out of the elevator. We went up to Ike's room to record a pod from Indianapolis, and we're coming down. And before I could even blink, Jerry Rice is just before me. And it was just like the only real reason where I really knew who it was. Like, you think like, oh, of course you know what Jerry Rice looks like. He was wearing this 7-Eleven chain around his neck, and it always open.
Yeah.
And he had that when they were interviewing him down on the field. His son was working out at the combine, ended up getting drafted as well. And so, I mean, to say that I have dapped up arguably the greatest football player ever, I mean, if he's not the best, he's certainly in the top 5 with like Lawrence Taylor and Tom Brady and, a who's who of NFL greats. Was just a small example of like the world that I got to get a small glimpse into. Listen, man, I would put our guest list up against any sports show out there in the 6 years that I did the show. And you're part of that, Jeff, in all seriousness, because you have to be able to network with people and help each other out in this industry. And that was a big thing that I learned of like, Jeff, I will gladly come on your show whenever you need me and vice versa. We're not getting paid any money to do this. So it's just like, to be a guest on your show to promote your work. And so that is something where, the people that give me those opportunities, Jeff, I want to pay them back tenfold. Ike was certainly a huge part of that. I'm thrilled with what he's doing in the Steelers front office as a scout for the team and for what's next in his post-playing career, but now in a scouting role and a front office role. for what's next, and then what's next for the next generation as well. So other, with Ike and his son's going to be a freshman player at the University of Alabama is certainly awesome to watch from afar. But then to see what all these other shows are doing, I mean, is people cable cut more and more of where this industry is headed. You might be watching this conversation or listening to this conversation throughout your day, and that's a passive behavior because you can be doing something else while you're listening to us. To be a small part of the community and what it means to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, to me, the timing was just right too, because really the only thing that we got to wait for right now is Aaron Rodgers. But of whether he signs, whether he retires, what's going to happen there. But that was really important for me as well as in terms of the timing. I felt like I owed it to the people that took the time to listen or to watch our show in each of the last 6 years. That was really important to me too. And so, Jeff, you're certainly a part of that family, of that tradition too, because you know this too. You've got to be able to hit singles and doubles before you can knock one out of the park and get a high profile guest. And, I could flex and say all these great guests that we had, and the list is certainly impressive, but it's the consistency in it, and it's being a part of someone's day-to-day lives and just sharing that passion with other people. It was an honor, man. It was an absolute honor. I've gone on long enough.
No, you're fine. I appreciate you sharing that with me. There's a funny story that I haven't told a lot of people. I don't think I've ever told it on the air. You said when you were 12 or 13, you never could imagine yourself in this situation.
Mhm.
When I was in middle school, I'll never forget this. And I'm older than you are, but still, I'm in 8th grade, and they had us take a standardized assessment. And it's not for a grade, it was to help guide you into maybe what occupation might be best for you. So you take a reading, a writing, mathematics, maybe you throw in some science. Like, it had all of it, except for like the stuff I was good at, like PE. But anyways, and when they finished everything up and you have the standardized test, you got this printout back, and it based off of your scores. It told you what your best, based off your scores, that is, what the best occupation for you could be. Maybe it's nursing, maybe it's a lawyer, maybe it's education, who knows. Mine literally came back inconclusive. It came back that I had no occupation, for my scores were probably so sporadic. And my mom kept it and actually gave it to me later, when I stepped away from teaching and education for 16 years and did this full time. And I said this to my wife, and she goes, maybe it's because your occupation wasn't even created at the time.
Mhm.
And I was like, the fact that I get to talk about this team that I love so much, and I get to talk about football, and like I get to talk about golf, another passion of mine, on a golf podcast. I'm a lucky individual. And I think that's what you kind of had in your sentiment there, is that we're really lucky to do what we do.
I'll name drop one. Let me hop in here. I'll name drop
Sure.
one. When we've had the luxury of talking to Ian Eagle, we talk to him each August, and now voice of the Final Four. He's called national championships, high profile NBA playoff games. He's the play-by-play announcer for the Nets, the NFL on CBS. He was like, there's not a single broadcast gig where you can go halfway in on, and to where it's not the type of industry where there's anything that's beneath you. Like, it might look flashy, and I could say, we've talked to Deion Sanders and we've talked to, Mike Tomlin on our show, but the viewer or the listener doesn't care. And Ian brought up the point of, okay, when I'm calling a 1 p.m. Eastern game, in the night before at the hotel, someone goes to get ice and it wakes me up in the middle of the night and I disrupts my sleep. The next day, no one cares when he has to deliver and dial it up and call the most exciting play of the game. And so that mentality, that thought process of, there's not a single time a broadcast where anything's beneath you. I want to walk into any conversation prepared. And even if you don't necessarily agree with my take or my analysis, I hope that I was at least entertaining in my delivery, and maybe I taught you something that you didn't know beforehand. And to hear him say that, and he's been doing this now for like 3+ decades, and for him to appear on our show, to take 30 minutes out of his day to talk to our listeners and viewers, man, I'd be a fool not to listen to that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the Steelers, and let's talk the theme of this podcast is going to be bold predictions.
Okay.
So we're talking bold predictions. Now, we'll do some not so bold predictions for 2025 as well. And let's take a look at the bold predictions first. If you want to break this down, offense, defense, whatever, however you want to do it, we're looking for maybe 2 to 4 give me a bold prediction that you have for the Steelers in this season. I know it's early on, but I'm curious where you're thinking for this upcoming year.
The first thing that comes to mind, Jeff, I don't think Rodgers is coming.
Oh, okay.
Like, I know odds would say otherwise. I'm well aware of that. I understand he's got personal things in his lives. Who doesn't? This date keeps getting pushed back this last one was, well, May 27th, OTAs is going to be there, and he'll be there by the time OTAs rolls around. Maybe not on the first day, but soon enough. We're into June. Like, if we do this again in July, Jeff, were we having the exact same conversation about Rodgers? If he was coming, I think he would have signed by now. Like, I don't know what more there is to wait for are you playing or not? And I look at Rodgers of wherever he's at in his life. I don't think he wants to go out the way that he did with the Jets, but I look at that and I contrast that with, if you saw the comments Darius Slay had, who's coming off a Super Bowl championship, has played at the highest level at the cornerback position in this league, and saying, hey, I want to be here and show face, and I'm paraphrasing here, but show this is where championships are built, and I want to be able to do the best to my ability to try to pursue a championship. I don't think the Steelers are actually going to win a championship, but it's that mentality and that veteran locker room presence which is going to prove invaluable for him coming to Pittsburgh. If Rodgers was going to sign with the Steelers, why it hasn't happened yet and why we continue to kick this can down the road is beyond me. If he were going to come, I think he would have already been on the roster by now. And I get some of the criticism. I understand he's not under contract, which is why he's not at OTAs. But how much longer we have to keep doing this? If he was there, I think he'd already be here by now. We'll see what happens, though. We'll see.
Well, hey, and that is a bold prediction because I think a lot of people, I heard from our source, and I wrote an article for SteelCurtainNetwork.com on Sunday about it, how the Steelers said they're going to be patient. They're willing to wait. And you bring up a valid point, though. Well, how long are you going to wait? I mean, are you going to let this guy just come in right before training camp and show up to Latrobe and St. Vincent College and say, we're all good? I get that sentiment, but it's going to be interesting. I think that is a bold prediction, though.
What's the next date on the calendar? Because it was, okay, here's the start of free agency. Then we're a week into free agency. Then it was, well, the Pat McAfee show's coming to Pittsburgh, and maybe he could announce it then. And then he made an appearance on the McAfee show, and we're like, could he announce it live on the show? What's the next date on the calendar that we have circled, Jeff?
I don't know. I mean, he already did Joe Rogan, didn't say anything about it. I would say for me, when I think about this, everyone's thinking mandatory minicamp, that he'll sign before that. So that's in 2 weeks from today, or Tuesday. I'm sorry. I don't know. Dave Schofield from the Steel Curtain Network always says, yeah, he could, but he could also say, I don't want to do any offseason stuff. So I'll sign after minicamp, and then I'll see you guys in training camp. I don't like that play per se, but at the same time, I could see that being the way it goes. And if it's not, then you would say you'd have to go back to Mike Tomlin's original quote at the owners' meetings in February down in Florida when he said training camp. And then he kind of tried to backpedal on those a little bit and said, well, I just kind of said that. That's the last date, is it not? He's pulling a Brett Favre is what he's doing, in case you were wondering.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan. Matt Canada's gone. Najee Harris is gone. Broderick Jones, your starting left tackle, is gone. George Pickens is gone. The end of the Roethlisberger era is gone. They traded Kenny Pitt. Like, at some point, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields are gone. If this offense really struggles, look at, like, just on paper, like, take all of the names removed. You are replacing your top passer, your top rusher, your starting left tackle, and your top pass catcher. If they struggle offensively, it's going to be to no surprise. I mean, in all honesty, another bold prediction offensively, I'll give you, Jeff Hartman, is this. I think Caleb Johnson will lead the Steelers in rushing in the 2025 season.
I like that. I like that a lot. I've been super impressed with this young man since he's been drafted in the 3rd round. Let me ask you a follow-up. When do you think, in terms of weeks in the season, when do you think Caleb Johnson takes over as the running back one? Or do they never, and he just is more productive over Jaylen Warren?
Here, I love Jaylen Warren, first of all. So this is not a dig on Jaylen Warren. It's more so his build. I think what you wanted to get out of Najee, you're going to get from Caleb Johnson. Now, if he can be as durable and hang on to the ball, great. But I hope that there's just a little bit more explosiveness, that burst that you never got from Najee Harris. It was almost like the Steelers were hoping Najee Harris would be like a 4.4 or 4.3 running back. I'm talking in terms of 40 speed. That's never going to happen. So Caleb Johnson, though, is a rookie. I hope he can come in. For me, it's more so banking on the development of the offensive line and the draft capital that you've spent on the offensive line, in that your last 2 first-round picks were offensive tackles. And then your starting center was a second rounder. Mason McCormick was your draft pick. And then Seumalo was your veteran. For spending 2 first-round picks on the tackles, they need to develop and develop quickly. And you've got to be able to rely on those players. I like seeing Broderick Jones come into OTAs in the best shape of his life. Like, newsflash for all of your listeners and viewers, Jeff, I want every professional athlete to come into the best shape of their life coming into OTAs and training camp. But it's a good thing to see now that Broderick's finally on the left side where they drafted him to be. And for what they spent in first-round draft capital, you're banking on those 2 guys developing quickly in the 2025 season.
All right, got any more offensive bold predictions, or you want to go to defense?
Let's go to defense, but let me have you give me one that you have of your own, Jeff, because I could go in any number of directions.
On offense or defense?
Lay it on me. I'm ready.
I would say on defense that I think that these 2025 Steelers defense is going to be statistically better in almost every facet in 2025.
Okay.
I think that the secondary, which a lot of people said was sagging at times, I love Darius Slay. I think Corey Trice, hopefully staying healthy, is going to be a good addition. Joey Porter, another year under his belt. Here's a signing that no one else is talking about that I think could almost be a Deshaun Elliott type signing, and that's Brandon Echols, the slot cornerback from the Jets that they picked up. I really like him. Juan Thornhill in this, I think, is an upgrade over DeMonte KZ. I think that especially when you look at the defensive line with Harmon and Black now as a part of it, and then the inside linebackers, I've said this on multiple shows, if Cole Holcomb can return back to even 75% of what he was prior to his injury, that is a super deep room now. Like, that is and then you throw in like Carson Bruner, 7th-round pick. No, he's not expected to do anything, but that's just going to add to the depth there. Really, really fascinating what the Steelers are going to be able to do on defense. And I think you throw in like a Jack Sawyer, they have more depth on the outside. I think this defense is going to be better than it was last year. And maybe that's not a bold prediction, Mark.
Well, no, you know what? Let me piggyback off this too. I think they'll get a deal done before the year, and I hope that they do. But if you let TJ Watt go into a contract season, my Lord, for opposing teams, for the Steelers' sake, they might want to try to let that happen. But I want to see the Steelers lock up TJ Watt long term, keep him happy. I'd rather get out ahead of the market of what I know Micah Parsons is going to get from the Cowboys. But if the Steelers say we're going to let it play out and let TJ Watt play in a contract season, oh my gosh, we think we've seen the best of TJ Watt, and I say not so fast, my friend.
That would be awful. That's the worst case scenario for the Steelers, in my opinion.
I know,
because everyone's like, well, you're gambling. Yeah, it is a gamble, and he could play really, really well, and you're not going to be able to, someone would pay him that they pull up the Brinks truck. Totally.
I don't know how to quantify this, but I think we see a return to form for Minka this year. You don't go from being a multi-time All-Pro then to all of a sudden not forcing takeaways or turnovers and then just being a very expensive salary. I don't know to say like, and how 10 interceptions. I don't know about that, but I think we see a return to form. He's just too good of a player. And I think he'll have, what was it, 3 years ago, where he was the best offensive player on defense when he had like 5 or 6 interceptions. And it was just like, he was everywhere.
Yeah.
I think we see a return to form for Minka. If you want me to put a number on it, I could look at some stats, but I think we see a return to form for Minka this year.
It's interesting you bring up Minka because really, I look at Minka Fitzpatrick and say, okay, he's struggled the last 3 years or so. And when I say struggled, it's not that he's not, he's leading the team in tackles sometimes. He's still being around the football. Everyone says the same thing. They're throwing away from him. They're not targeting him. Okay. So what was the difference? The difference was Terrell Edmunds was on the team. He had his most productive years when Terrell Edmunds was there. I find it extremely difficult to believe and or understand in my football brain that Terrell Edmonds, of all people, was somehow this difference maker for Minka Fitzpatrick. If it was that big of a deal, then go into the film and say, what did Edmonds do? Go with Minka, go with Deshaun Elliott and say, we need to duplicate whatever he was doing. Let's do that again. I don't know. I don't think Minka has lost a step. I don't think that he's somehow lesser than, but he's struggling. And that, I guess, that a return to form. He had one interception last year, I believe, and that was getting
Yeah.
him off the schneid. So I would say if he had 4, would be like, okay, that's a return to form for Minka. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. And I look at it too because he's got 2 more years left on that deal. He's going to want to get one more payday of like premium money. Will the Steelers pay that in 2 years? I mean, I don't know who the quarterback's going to be, so it's hard for me to evaluate that question. But from the player standpoint, that's what he's playing for. And I don't think all of a sudden you just snap the fingers and say he's washed, especially at the safety position. Like maybe corner, maybe running back, but at the safety, it's like, no, I do think teams game plan for him too. I do because of his ball hawking abilities in seasons past. So I do think he'll get back to, okay, that premium level performance of what you're paying him to do. And look, he does make difference making plays, even if it isn't always the interception or the pick six of what you want to see. But I think we see that return to form, that ball hawk, that center fielder of, okay, another year in this system and another year playing alongside Deshaun Elliott too. And I mean, Deshaun Elliott, just in terms of the playmaking list last year, was probably the better of the two. And what a signing that was. So again, I think for Minka's sake, though, getting back, it being a ball hawk and causing turnovers and takeaways, I think is the key for him. And again, I don't think that just immediately vanishes, especially at safety.
All right. And if you don't have any other ones, I have a question for you about whether a prediction would fall into bold or not so bold. Do you have any other ones that you want to read off?
Not off the top of my head, Jeff.
That's
so
fine.
Go ahead and lay it on with the question.
All right. So let's go down. You said your first bold prediction was that you don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to win, which would mean that Mason Rudolph is the quarterback one, barring something else like a Kirk Cousins trade. Lord help me if they do that. They'll put that way. But let's say Mason Rudolph is quarterback one. Is it a bold or not so bold prediction that Mike Tomlin will have a winning season even with Mason Rudolph at the helm?
Not so bold, but that's because of what we've seen to this point. Like, I think it's 9-8 or 10-7 again. I mean, everyone's freaking out right now. And look, I do think that I would say the Steelers mismanaged the quarterback position this offseason. Go back
How
to that
so? How so? If you don't mind me asking, do you think they should have just ponied up the money for Fields?
Sure. Like, look at what the average starter makes that's not on a rookie salary. So to answer your question, yes.
Okay. Fair enough.
I would have. And is Fields your long-term answer? No, but I would have been in a better position to say, okay, Fields and Rudolph are your 2 quarterbacks than the bunch that they have now.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
then, I mean, with Wilson too, they could have said, hey, why they didn't bring Wilson back? Well, okay, so we go with Mason. This is not how the Steelers, like, if we're going to take what Art Rooney II is saying at face value earlier this offseason, saying we'll try to bring one of the 2 back, hopefully it's Fields, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. So, yeah, I would have. And okay, but with Mason Rudolph, we saw it in the 2019 season when it was he and Duck Hodges filling in for Ben Roethlisberger. Like, we know that the Steelers can muddy up a game, try to run the ball as best they can, and rely on the leg of Chris Boswell. It's not flashy. It's not fantasy football. It is football that can get you to a winning record. Now, you get to a winning record and you sneak into the playoffs. That writing is on the wall in terms of the success that you can have once you get to the postseason. But we've seen them do it before. And until Mike Tomlin proves otherwise, year 19, I'm going to go with what history has shown me, for better or for worse. And again, is it the flashiest thing that you've seen in the world? No, it's going to be the same old. But it's almost like, look, you got to restock the cupboard, and you can't really restock the cupboard until you get to next offseason when you've got a boatload of draft picks. The draft is in Pittsburgh, and perhaps you're in a better position to get your quarterback of the future. But Mason Rudolph, like, I'm excited to see him get his opportunity if Rodgers decides not to sign. At the same time, like, it could go very poorly. Is this going to be the Mason Rudolph we saw rescue the Steelers season at the end of the 2023 season? Or is this going to be the guy back in 2019 that got benched in favor of an undrafted Duck Hodges? I almost throw out what happened last year in Tennessee because there's a reason why the Titans had the number 1 pick. And you'd say, well, he went 1-4 and it starts a season ago. Arthur Moats told me this when I've talked with him, Jeff, and he goes, Mason can at least get you out of a stadium. And whether he's a starter, we'll see if he's given that opportunity, but at least he'll have that opportunity, whereas years past, he's kind of looking over his shoulder. He's still looking over his shoulder for Aaron Rodgers, but Tomlin's proven with a lesser Mason Rudolph that he could have a 500 record. I don't see why it would be different now. Until proven otherwise, that's just, we're kicking the can down the road. And the frustration lies of you limp into the playoffs, and then once you're there, you get smoked. That's the frustration. And you look at that relative to the quarterback, the talent in the AFC, and it's like the Steelers are nowhere close to where they need to be in that regard. But there's still a lot of worse franchises that they consistently beat by playing the very conservative style of football. And that's, let's run the ball, let's win the turnover battle and win special teams. And we've got a kicker who's an all-pro.
All right. I want to ask you one more question similar to kind of like the bold, not so bold. And this is the last one I'll ask you before we call it a show. In your opinion, bold or not so bold, Omar Khan and, by proxy, Andy Weidel are completely changing the Steelers roster for the better. What do you think?
Like right now at this point in time?
What they've done so far in their time as GM and an assistant GM.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I go back to what I said earlier, where this season, the reality is you're replacing your quarterback, your running back, your star receiver, and your left tackle. That is a huge changeover. Take the names out of that. So it's going to be tough to have early success early on because you still have to gel with the new guys that you got. And remember, if it is Mason or if it is Rodgers, if Rodgers ends up signing, you're going to have to do the same quarterback carousel again next offseason.
Yep.
So for the better, that remains to be seen. I like what they've done in the draft, but ultimately they're going to be judged based on what they do at quarterback. That's not going to be resolved this offseason, period. Ultimately, that's going to be how they're judged because the quarterback play come postseason is how they're going to be evaluated. I like a lot of the picks that they've got and a lot of the development that they've gotten in. You look at the last few drafts of Kevin Colbert, who by and large had a successful run, but a lot of the players that Colbert drafted aren't on the team anymore. So can you get those players that you draft? Like another measure of success that I have is, can they get to a second contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'm looking at that as well. So for better, I mean, they're molding it. You hear this a lot with Andy Weidel of he's doing with the Steelers how he helped build the Eagles into a Super Bowl champion. That's building the lines. Certainly, they've invested a lot in that in the last 3 drafts, and you can build that up and then go get your quarterback of the future. Again, I look at the 12 draft picks in next offseason to where even if you have another record where you go 9-8 or 10-7 with Tomlin, you could then potentially draft up and trade up in the drafts, even if you're, say, in the teens or the early 20s in terms of where the Steelers draft pick falls. And so they've positioned themselves to be able to do that. And a lot of the compensatory picks that they've got back. Ultimately, I think the big thing is the next offseason. Like, I hate to throw the 2025 season away before it's even started, but barring like major injuries to other teams, we kind of already know how this is going to go given what we've seen the last several years.
I was gonna say, it feels like it. It feels like we know how it's going to go, like you said. So, all right, Mark, I do appreciate your time and your insight. I want to give you an opportunity to plug social media channels so that people can stay in touch with you in terms of what you're doing and what's coming next.
Yeah, Mark Bergin, Mark Bergin _ on like Instagram and Twitter. YouTube page, like if Rodgers signs, I can do a quick short. I'll probably have some sort of reaction there. But yeah, you can find me on social media, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and all of that. So I'll be there. I mean, honestly, Jeff, whatever you need me, I'm happy to hop on and chop it up with you. I certainly appreciate you having me on, and keep doing your thing with the Steel Curtain Network. And this was just one of many relationships that I was able to form over the last several years. And it's like, okay, how do I keep those things going with just a lot of the contacts that I have, a lot of great people, a lot of great insights in and around the NFL.
Mark, I appreciate your time. We'll stay in touch, man. I'll talk
Yeah.
to you soon.